Many thanks to Tony for organizing this session, and it's great to see so many people at an 8:30 a.m. session on the New Deal. I think every time that happens, an angel gets its wings. Or perhaps it's a sign we really all should be at the ATM getting the money out of our bank accounts. You know, economic collapse has an upside, though. It does mean my book will come out in paperback. It makes sense, I think, at a session on new work on the New Deal to maybe say a couple of words about the older writing on the New Deal. And almost since Franklin Roosevelt's first 100 days in office came to an end, Americans and historians have really struggled to comprehend the nature and limits of the New Deal order. Where older scholarship, I think, may be exemplified by the work of Arthur Schlesinger Jr., Frank Friedel, presents these years as the age of Roosevelt, right? Dominated by the dashing champion of the forgotten man. The work of subsequent historians has been, on balance, more skeptical. And I think Martin Bernstein perhaps epitomizes the New Left reading of the New Deal, writing that its reforms, quote, did not transform the American system. They conserved and protected American capitalism. And for Bernstein, the achievements of the New Deal were so limited that the people who joined its political coalition, you know, more than 4 people did vote for Roosevelt, but the people who joined its political coalition were evidence for what he called, quote, one of the crueler ironies of liberal politics, that marginal men trapped in hopelessness were seduced by rhetoric, by the style and movement, by the symbolism of efforts seldom reaching beyond words. Instead, Bernstein argues, the New Deal's only accomplishment was in providing just enough relief to create a sort of false consciousness, able to dupe the masses into voting for FDR. In my work, I have found that previous historians of the New Deal have for too long overlooked what I have come to call a revolution in the priorities of the American state during the 1930s, a revolution that radically transformed the physical landscape, political system, and economy of the United States. By taking a fresh look at the New Deal's politics and policies, I argue that what made the New Deal revolutionary were its public works programs. And I draw here on the ideas of an old institutionalist economist, Joseph Schumpeter, to locate these works programs at the core of the New Deal. In his classic 1918 essay, The Crisis of the Tax State, Schumpeter declares, quote, the budget is the skeleton of the state, stripped of all misleading ideologies. So, you know, if you take the time to look at the New Deal's budget, to look at the federal budget from 1930 to 1940, you find that the New Deal spent over 2/3 of its money on such programs as the Public Works Administration, the Works Progress Administration, and the Federal Works Agency. This spending represented a dramatic increase over pre-Great Depression spending on construction, as the federal government developed the state capacity to place public works projects in all but three of the nation's 3,071 counties, touching the lives of both the urban and rural unemployed. While liberal historians have presented the New Deal's public works programs as well-intentioned efforts well-intentioned welfare programs that failed to end the Depression's mass unemployment, while subsequent critics have dismissed these programs as underfunded measures that served only to prop up the existing order, blinding people to the limits of the New Deal, both sides in the literature have neglected that public works programs were the New Deal's central enterprise. I suppose I might say a few words here about yet a third side critiquing the New Deal, Amity Shlaes and the renewed right wing, but Eric Rochway has done a great job of taking this on, so I won't say anything about that. You can Google it. It is here. By paying close attention to the visual functions of the state, my work builds upon and advances the work of the only scholar to view the New Deal as, quote, a massive governmental recapitalization for purposes of economic development, the late Jordan Schwartz. So, if public works are the central enterprise and the central achievement of the New Deal, again, just to underscore, 2/3 of the New Deal's money spent in all but 3 of the nation's counties, just what were these programs? What did they do? The Public Works Administration, created in 1933, received an initial appropriation of $3.3 billion, which was about $45.8 billion in 2002 dollars, which it mainly applied to heavy construction and large-scale building. And to give us a bit of context for this figure, this was just over 165% of the federal government's revenues in 1933, or 5.9% of 1933 US GDP. So relative to the size of the government, relative to the size of the economy, an enormous investment. The PWA relied on private contractors, helped to pay for projects like the Tennessee Valley Authority and Boulder Dam. In 1935, the New Deal creates the Works Progress Administration that was nominally intended to do lighter construction work. It avoided private contracting. Its initial appropriation of $4.88 billion, about $64 billion in 2002, was about 135% of the federal government's revenues in 1935, or about 6.7% of GDP in that year. Again, relative to the size of the economy, the size of the government, a huge investment. Although it was intended as a vast relief effort for employing the unskilled, the WPA built an impressive and wide range of projects, including over 480 airports, 78,000 bridges, nearly 40,000 public buildings. Both of these programs were the beneficiaries of the federal government's commitment to construction. During these years, the payrolls of the WPA, the PWA, were among the largest in the nation, easily dwarfing those of the largest private firms. In carrying out their mandates, these two programs integrated a multitude of municipal construction experts, members of the Army Corps of Engineers, and civil engineers into the national state. Perhaps most significantly, these programs developed the infrastructure that we heard about earlier that laid the foundations for post-war economic growth, presaging both the national highways and the military-industrial complex. And in the post-war period, government-sponsored economic development took on some global implications. Just one brief example, Lyndon Johnson's vision of somehow exporting Keynesian-style economic development to Southeast Asia. You know, we can somehow solve our problems in Vietnam if we just put a TVA on the Mekong Delta. Okay, that's not going to work. But you know, that idea, where does that come from? You know, this testifies to the powerful example that New Deal Public Works had as a policy tool, both at home and potentially abroad. To pick up a little bit more on Gavin's point about the South and New Deal-sponsored economic development, on September 11th, 2001, we may recall George Bush kind of hopscotched around the country before getting back to Washington, D.C. His first stop in Barksdale, Louisiana, was at an Air Force base originally built by the WPA. And, you know, we know that Bush was a history major at Yale, but I'm willing to bet that he didn't know this. But you know, the fact that all of us, that we don't know this about the New Deal really indicates how hidden this history of the New Deal's role in developing the nation has been. By viewing the New Deal in this way, we can start to see the outlines of a different interpretation. The terrific increase over pre-Depression spending on public construction that these programs represented, the far-reaching federal efforts invested in directing this money, and the long-run impact of the infrastructure itself really do form the components of this public works revolution. This construction helped justify the new role of the state in American life, legitimizing both intellectually and physically, you know, around the country, what's come to be known as Keynesian management of the economy. By sponsoring this infrastructure, New Dealers remade the built environment that managed the movement of people, electricity, goods, water, and waste. Among the New Deal's projects were some of the largest and most significant structures built in human history. So by focusing on the New Deal's political economy in this way, via public works investment, this allows us to ask two questions, I think. The first, what did these programs accomplish? And I've gestured, you know, briefly at this. And the second, what do these accomplishments tell us about New Deal liberalism?